A young woman joined what was supposed to be a thrilling shark diving trip, only to be captured by a deranged captain. She was hung in the air and forced to watch someone being torn apart by sharks. Another terrified girl sat frozen on the deck. What fate awaits her? And why is the captain doing something so insane? Without further delay, let's dive into the story. A young couple arrives at the harbor to find an Australian captain named Tucker, who runs private shark diving tours. The night before, they'd stayed up too late having fun, so they missed their group trip in the morning. Unwilling to go home disappointed, they decided to hire Tucker for a more exciting private adventure. Tucker looked suspicious and asked if anyone knew they were here. Then he smirked and said, "Just making sure, have you two written your wills yet?" The couple froze in shock. Tucker quickly explained that shark diving is a high-risk activity, and the will thing was just a precaution. He reassured them that with his years of experience, nothing bad would happen. Relieved, the girl named Heather agreed to go. Tucker took them aboard and headed out to sea. Once they reached shark territory, he poured a bucket of bloody fish soup into the water and told them it was time to dive in. Heather panicked when a mako shark suddenly leapt out of the water and wanted to back out immediately. Seeing her fear, Tucker said he had a special way to calm nerves, then began singing. The ridiculous nursery song made Heather laugh, and she finally agreed to go in. She climbed into the cage and looked down. Dozens of sharks circled beneath her. Heather could barely breathe from fear, and her boyfriend kept comforting her to stay calm and take in the terrifying view. After a while, Heather climbed back up, thrilled. "That was amazing," she shouted. Her boyfriend laughed and said he'd have quite a story to brag about later. But he never got the chance. Tucker suddenly shoved him into the ocean, feeding him to the sharks. The scene shifts to Zephyr, a young woman who loves surfing. After spending hours in the waves, she stopped by a convenience store, where she met Moses, a real estate agent. They hit it off instantly, and that night, they got intimate inside Zephyr's RV. 2.5 minutes later, Moses asked why she loved surfing so much, but Zephyr didn't reveal the real reason. When she pulled out a store-bought sandwich, Moses frowned and said those things were full of additives. He offered to cook her something fresh and hot at his place instead. Moses busied himself in the kitchen, grilling a few fresh burgers, but when he stepped out holding the plate, Zephyr was gone, vanished without a trace. In fact, Zephyr had driven back to the beach to surf at night, but when she opened her trunk, the mount for her surfboard was missing. She went to look nearby and unexpectedly ran into Tucker. He smiled warmly, chatting like an old friend, asking if she was alone. After probing a bit, he handed her what she needed and kindly warned her that night surfing could be dangerous. Thinking she'd met a helpful stranger, Zephyr happily assembled her board. Just then, Moses texted her, and she replied instantly. She struggled desperately, but his strength was overwhelming. He knocked her unconscious, stuffed her body into a bag, and loaded it onto his truck. Before dawn, Tucker returned to the harbor. As he prepared to bring Zephyr aboard, a nearby dog sensed danger and began barking wildly. Tucker glared at it with cold, murderous eyes but said nothing. Meanwhile, Moses went to the beach, worried that Zephyr hadn't replied since last night. He called her phone, only to find it still inside her RV, but Zephyr herself was nowhere to be found. Zephyr suddenly woke up from unconsciousness and tore the tape off her mouth. Terrified to find herself chained, she struggled desperately, but all her efforts were useless. She looked over and saw Heather beside her, asking frantically where they were. Heather replied that they were on Tucker's boat, then awkwardly apologized, saying, "Sorry, I just used the toilet, it might smell a bit." When Zephyr saw the makeshift bucket on the floor, she broke down completely and screamed for help, but they were in the middle of the vast ocean. No one could hear them no matter how loud she shouted. Zephyr refused to give up and screamed for over 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Tucker calmly enjoyed his meal on deck, completely unfazed. After eating, he grabbed a fishing rod and, with the skill of a seasoned fisherman, effortlessly reeled in a big catch. Eventually, Zephyr stopped screaming and started searching for something sharp, like a hairpin, to pick the handcuffs, but nothing worked. Desperate, she asked Heather if she had a boyfriend who might notice something was wrong and come to rescue them. At the mention of her boyfriend, tears welled up in Heather's eyes. She whispered that no one was coming to save them, then asked Zephyr the same question. Zephyr paused before admitting that no one would know she was missing either. Meanwhile, Moses searched everywhere for Zephyr but couldn't find her. Thinking she was ignoring him, he sadly drove away, until he saw her RV being towed. Alarmed, he rushed to the police station to report it. When the police asked for Zephyr's details, Moses was at a loss. He'd only spent one night with her and didn't even know her full name. Back on the boat, Heather lay on her bed, filled with regret. She blamed herself for cutting ties with her mother and chasing freedom, taking a year off school to travel, only to vanish without anyone knowing. She asked Zephyr about her past. Zephyr said she was American and had a rough childhood, constantly moved between foster families until she stopped trusting anyone. Coming to Australia was her attempt to live freely, on her own terms. After sharing their stories, the two women grew closer. Though their lives were different, both were freedom seekers. Heather even asked Zephyr to tell her a joke, saying, "If I'm gonna die, I want to die laughing." Zephyr rolled her eyes but played along, making Heather laugh so hard she nearly lost her breath. When Heather began gasping for air, Zephyr suddenly thought of the metal wire in her swimsuit and asked about it. Heather's eyes lit up with hope as she quickly took it off and tossed it to Zephyr. She tried tearing the wire out with her teeth but didn't finish before Tucker entered with their food. Tucker noticed Heather wasn't wearing her swimsuit but didn't comment. The girls obediently ate, and he left, seemingly satisfied. As soon as he was gone, Zephyr grabbed the wire and tried to pick the lock, but her vision blurred. The milk he'd given them was drugged. She collapsed just as Tucker returned, grinning wickedly while picking the wire off the floor. When Zephyr regained consciousness, she found herself on the deck. Heather was still unconscious beside her. A camera was set up on the floor, pointed straight at them. Zephyr panicked, demanding to know what Tucker was planning. Tucker walked up to Heather with a knife, snipped a lock of her hair as a souvenir, and woke her up. He coldly switched on the camera, setting the scene. As Heather was about to be lowered into the shark-infested water, Zephyr screamed at him, calling him a psychopath. Tucker replied calmly, "Sharks don't actually like human flesh, they just mistake us for food. I've been feeding them for a long time, so now anything that drops from this boat, they think it's a meal." With that, he tightened his grip on the rope, lowering half of Heather's body into the water. The shark tore off the lower half of Heather's body, blood spraying everywhere. Zephyr's pulse spiked in horror, but Tucker looked absolutely thrilled. He called it the greatest show on earth, then pointed the camera toward Zephyr, saying she'd be the star of tomorrow night's performance. After witnessing Heather's brutal death, Zephyr was thrown back into the cage, carving desperate words onto the wall. In stark contrast, Tucker danced wildly around the cabin, replaying his footage with twisted pride, declaring himself the best director in the world. Afterward, he carefully preserved Heather's lock of hair, sealed the tape, and stored it in a locker. But inside that locker were dozens of tapes, a horrifying sign that Tucker had murdered countless women before. The next day, only Heather's severed head remained, drifting in the sea. She must have died regretting ever leaving home. The next morning, Tucker brought breakfast to Zephyr. Seeing the same bread and milk, she shouted, "Get away from me, you freak." Tucker didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and started rambling about marine life, saying that without sharks, the ocean would be overrun by weak species, and only sharks maintained balance and order. He said all this to justify his actions, to prove that, in his mind, he was right. But Zephyr wasn't fooled. She sneered at him, "You love sharks but kill people, you sick monster." Her insults finally drove him away. After Tucker left, Zephyr glanced toward the makeshift toilet, examined it closely, and finally managed to snap off its handle. That night, Tucker rewatched Heather's death video, already planning who his next leading lady would be. He crushed sedatives into powder and approached Zephyr with a syringe, but suddenly, she fought back. She slammed his head against the iron bed frame, knocking him unconscious. Zephyr quickly grabbed the key from his belt, unlocked her cuffs, and looked for a knife to defend herself. Then began a deadly chase. Zephyr sprinted to the cockpit, grabbed the radio, and screamed for help, but no one responded. Looking out, she spotted a cruise ship in the distance and rushed to the deck, shouting for rescue. But Tucker caught up, knife in hand, cornering her at the edge of the deck. Refusing to surrender, Zephyr grabbed the camera and held it up defensively. Tucker froze. He couldn't risk damaging his camera, his masterpiece. He tried to calm her down, but Zephyr hurled the device straight into the sea. Moments later, the sedative took effect. She collapsed and fell overboard. Tucker rushed to haul her back up. Meanwhile, Moses hadn't given up the search. Police and rescue teams helped, assuming Zephyr had drowned while surfing. They searched for days but found nothing, yet Moses refused to stop looking. He reviewed hours of roadside surveillance footage and noticed a suspicious vehicle following Zephyr's RV. Zooming in, he saw Tucker's logo on the side and immediately started digging online. Moses called a travel agent, but they told him Captain Tucker was on vacation and that his shark diving tours were currently suspended. In reality, Tucker was out buying a new camera. The old one was gone. He sped to a pawn shop, found what he needed, and raced back, but it was rush hour, and traffic brought him to a crawl. Furious, he slammed on his horn nonstop. Then, through the traffic, Tucker spotted a beautiful young woman crossing the street. His eyes darkened, a new, twisted idea had just been born. Sensing something was wrong, Moses drove straight to the harbor, and there it was, Tucker's boat anchored by the pier. He pounded on the door, but no one answered. Just as he was about to leave, a faint noise came from below deck. He bent down to listen, then grabbed a fishing gaff and smashed the glass window. Breaking inside, he found Zephyr bound and gagged. After ripping the tape off her mouth, she urged him to find a pin or something sharp to unlock her cuffs, and to call the police immediately. Moses did as she said, but before he could answer the dispatcher asking if he needed police, ambulance, or fire service, Tucker, who had just returned, burst in and knocked him to the floor. Moses tried to call for help, but it was useless. Tucker snatched the phone, hung up, and demanded to know where he came from. To his surprise, Moses was tougher than expected. Despite being beaten down, he fought back, nearly choking Tucker to death. Just then, the old broker burst in and struck Moses with a blunt object, knocking him out. Thinking he'd saved the day, the man froze when he heard Zephyr's screams from below. Before he could react, Tucker turned and killed him on the spot. After dealing with the bodies, Tucker went to check on Zephyr. Seeing she was still restrained, he decided to sail toward shark territory to dispose of the corpses, but the boat was low on fuel, so he stopped by a gas dock first. Meanwhile, Moses regained consciousness, ashamed for ruining the rescue attempt, but Zephyr didn't blame him. She could hardly believe someone had come all this way just to save her. Moses asked why she had run away that night. Zephyr said it was for freedom, but he shook his head. He knew about her past, abandoned by her parents, bounced from one foster family to another, until she stopped believing in anyone. As they spoke, Tucker stormed in, announcing that he wanted an extra show this afternoon. He tied Moses to the winch while forcing Zephyr to sit motionless in her chair. Zephyr's eyes widened in terror when she saw a mutilated body on the floor, blood splattered everywhere. Before she could even process it, Tucker switched on the winch, making her scream in panic. She begged him to stop, warning that if Moses died, people would come looking for him, but Tucker screamed, "Only the dead keep secrets." Zephyr pleaded, offering herself in Moses's place. Tucker pretended to be moved. "For love like that, I'm touched," he said, but then coldly restarted the machine. Half of Moses's body was lowered into the water. Zephyr screamed for him to stay still. Tucker, exhilarated, lifted his camera and said, "Today's guest star, the bull shark, the deadliest predator in the sea." He waited eagerly for the kill. But the shark suddenly swam away, throwing Tucker off. He hauled Moses back up as Zephyr let out a shaky breath of relief. Tucker prepared to lower him again, but Moses was bleeding heavily. One dip and he'd be gone. Just then, a helicopter appeared overhead. Panicking, Tucker pulled them both back up and locked them inside. Soon, the helicopter disappeared into the distance. Moses's condition worsened, and Zephyr, desperate, resorted to drastic measures to break her cuffs. Just then, Tucker entered smugly with dinner in hand. "Tonight's going to be the best performance yet," he sneered. "Try to make a perfect ghost, will you?" Then he turned and left. But Zephyr wasn't planning to die quietly. Late at night, as Tucker prepared for the final performance with his male and female leads, he entered the cabin and froze. On the bed lay only Zephyr's severed thumb. His breathing grew heavy with rage. Zephyr had escaped, slamming the cabin door behind her. Furious, Tucker grabbed tools to unscrew the bolts, but before she could start the engine, he cut the main power. His face twisted with fury as he began hunting for his prey. The deadly game of cat and mouse began. Zephyr tried climbing through the skylight to reach the deck, but Tucker yanked her back down. He drew his knife, ready to strike, yet Zephyr wasn't about to die quietly. She grabbed a frying pan and fought back viciously. Swinging both the pan and a small fruit knife, Zephyr launched a frantic attack, finally knocking Tucker down. The knife, however, got stuck in his hand, forcing her to flee. When Tucker turned the lights back on, he was shocked. Zephyr was already hundreds of meters away, swimming toward the shore. Realizing she was escaping, he grabbed his harpoon gun and started the speedboat in pursuit. He caught up and covered her mouth before she could scream. Though he admired her fiery spirit, Tucker knew he couldn't contain her any longer. So he tied Moses to a chair, forcing him to watch the woman he loved be fed to sharks. A bull shark, drawn by the bloody water, appeared. Ecstatic, Tucker shoved Zephyr into the sea and raised his camera, until another shark swam in. Enraged, he speared the intruder with a hook. Panicking, Zephyr yanked the hook free to defend herself, but the bull shark suddenly lost interest and swam away. She seized the chance, using the hook to climb back aboard.
Behind you!
Zephyr fell back into the water and saw a shark gliding toward her. She clutched her bleeding arm, praying it was full, and miraculously, it swam away. On deck, Tucker peered into the dark water, waiting to see if Zephyr had been eaten, but suddenly, she climbed aboard from behind, armed and ready to strike. Tucker panicked, scrambling to climb away, but his wounds were bleeding too much. He slipped and fell into the water, instantly devoured by the very sharks he had raised. It seemed like the nightmare was finally over. But suddenly, the harpoon line wrapped around Zephyr's leg, dragging her underwater. Moses screamed in terror, his wounds tore open, blood pouring out as he collapsed unconscious. Fortunately, Zephyr survived. She reached the shore and found Moses barely breathing. Lighting a flare for help, she spotted a cruise ship responding in the distance. Rushing to his side, she pleaded through tears for him to wake up. In that final moment, she confessed her love, and miraculously, Moses opened his eyes. The film Dangerous Animals 2025 comes to an end. Perhaps the dangerous animals aren't the sharks, but humans themselves. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next recap.